Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura, and today I am going to discuss with you how I rate manga on GoodReads. I use GoodReads almost exclusively for all of my reading, and it's just a way for me to track everything that I read in one place. I mostly do this actually not because I want to rate things or because I want to see or I want people to see what I'm reading. I mostly do it because I think it's a convenient way for me to see when did I last read something, or should I reread something. I am a voracious rereader, and I really have to put the brakes on my rereading in order for me to actually read new things. I love to reread. So it just sort of gives me a way to kind of better manage my reading. But at the same time, every time I do read something, I like to rate it. And this is just another way for me to say to myself, is this worth rereading, or do you want to look at it again? The other thing, when I do rate stuff, I don't consider these sort of like set in stone ratings. I do anticipate that I'm going to reread everything that I have read. And every time I reread something, I go back and I reevaluate what it was that I rated it as. Especially things that I haven't read in several years, I like to go back because I generally don't remember things, or I experience the titles differently because I have read so much. And so, you know, the first time I read something and I would see it as new and interesting and different and as exciting, now maybe seems really regular and average, and I've read it before in so many other different titles. If I can see that this is not new or special or different, it doesn't stand head above the crowd, then I'm going to change my rating for it. Or the same goes that sometimes originally I was a new reader, and some titles I didn't connect with them because they were maybe more complicated or more satirical or more artistic in a different way than I was kind of expecting to experience it the first time, and so I rated it lower. And now those are things that I'm actually looking for in manga, and so I will rate them higher. So my ratings, shuffle back and forth, but over all of this time that I have been rating, I do look at some specific criteria, or at least in the last 6 or 7 years. These are the criteria that I use when I determine what ratings I should be giving to manga. So basically I have to work within the 5-star rating system of GoodReads. So you can have 1 star, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stars. Like, those are your options. You can't actually have no stars because then they don't consider it being rated. So you do have to at the very least put 1 star on there. So those are sort of like the lowest star ratings. And what I do is I have 5 questions that kind of I asked myself, or 5 categories that I asked myself a series of questions in that determine whether or not I give stars based on those questions. So I'm going to go through those different categories and tell you kind of my thought process, and then I will show you some examples of how I rate things. Because I personally find it interesting. I like to define things. You will find that out many times in my videos. So the categories that I look at are, 1, is it manga? Because I have to give it 1-star rating in order to rate it on GoodReads. So I have to have a very easy category for it to fulfill. Most of the things that I read are manga, and if I am rating manga, I'm comparing it to other manga. I'm not comparing it to other graphic novels. I'm not comparing it to comic books. I'm not comparing it to novels or poetry or anything else. I'm only comparing it within its specific genre and format. So that kind of allows me to give a star rating at least to everything. So the second category is a very important category, and that is, what is the story? How does the plot progress? Is it well written? Is it believable? Is it memorable? Are the characters interesting? Is it doing something new or different or unique or interesting? Does it stand above in a particular genre? Is it important? And I think that, like, it is a huge category and it is many, many questions, but really I'm looking at a story and I'm thinking to myself, is this good? And, of course, the ratings of goodness is so subjective. So these are kind of the questions that I ask myself when I'm reading something. For the most part, most plots, particularly in shonen and shoujo manga, are going to be like maybe or in between plots. They're not going to be spectacular. They're not going to be horrible. So I usually will give about a half star for plot in almost every single manga that I read. But of course there's going to be exceptions. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at for story. The other second most important thing, because you can't have one without the other and you need both in order to have manga, is the art. And the art, again, I'm going to ask a lot of the same kind of questions. Does the art tell the story? Can I look at the art without knowing the words and be able to understand the story? Is the art doing something new or different? Is it special? And so I am looking at what is happening in the story. I'm looking at the construct. I'm looking at the materials used. And I look very carefully at these things because art itself is really important to me, and it is the thing that I went to university for, not art drawing, but art sort of critique. And so for me, when I look at something, I am looking very much at the construct and the position it plays in the history of manga, and is it lazy, I think is sort of maybe my biggest question. I'm looking at if they're doing something interesting or impressive with the art in a particular story. So I put a huge value on art and story. I do look at them somewhat separately, but those are two big stars that, you know, stories are going to need to have. And again, for primarily most of the titles that I'm going to look at, they're going to get a half star for this particular category because they are doing kind of a good job, but they have to do something spectacular in order to push them over into a full star. So these two categories, they're huge. I wish that I had many, many stars in order to fill, but they really are only saying yes or no for 2 stars in my entire 5-star rating. The next star is kind of maybe slightly less, like I put less emphasis on it, so it might not really affect a rating greatly. The last star is probably the most important. So this one in particular is about translation, and it is about publishing. And if I think that the publishing of something in particular is poor quality, if I think that there are real publishing errors, if I think the editing is poor in it, if I think that the translation is bad, or if the translation is amazing, and yes, you can tell at some times when the translation is so poor or the translation is so good, you really can see the translation, and those are important things because they affect my reading of a particular title. Those, you know, grammar mistakes and strange translations or lack of translation notes, or the fact that a book is too heavy to hold, or, you know, if I want to, you know, open the book, if it cracks the spine, like that's a big deal to me, and I am going to deal fairly harshly with the whole package of bringing this thing over to a North American publishing, to a North American audience. You know, translation does not have to occur if I am a Japanese speaker. If I live in Japan, I don't need to read in translation. I don't need to read these other publications. So this publication, this whole category has to do with how is this manga treated in order to bring it over into North America. You know, one of the big pet peeves of mine is going to be, have some of the Japanese qualities been actually removed from the manga in order to make it more palatable. I think these are real failings in publishing, and so they are things that I judge incredibly harshly when I see them happen. So things like manga being flipped, I will forgive manga being flipped in the very early days of North American manga publishing, but I won't forgive it now unless it was by the author's request. So there are a very small handful of titles that have had this happen because of the actual author doing this work for publishers. But if manga is published in the English reading direction, I have already lost a significant portion of what makes manga fun to read. If the names in manga have been altered in order to make them seem more Western. That is one of my biggest, giantest pet peeves in all of manga publishing, is when it needs to sound like an American. When the classes that they are taking in school are changed around so that they're not learning English, they're learning Japanese. When characters are referring to famous people and they refer instead to famous people in North America because it would be too difficult to refer to someone that nobody in North America knew. These are real problems, and I will give a big fat no when I see these happen in ratings. So obviously something I'm passionate about, but at the same time this is not as important as the first, or as category 2 and 3. So those ones will get, you know, big fat yeses. This one could get a big fat no, but it still might not affect the overall rating very much. And that's because my 5th rating, of course, is going to be my feelings about a particular title. I can think that it is amazing art. I can think that it is a great story. I can think that, you know, the publishing is beautiful, but I can also not like it. And so that can really affect my rating. I do allow my feelings to kind of be the final judge on a particular title, particularly if I have some massive moral objection, because my feelings get quite strong and riled up in very particular situations. It doesn't happen very often, and so I do allow these moral objections to really take away from my rest of my rating. So yeah, I do consider a lot of different things in order to rate my manga, and I can, you know, it's because I've done this for so long that I can see what ratings I'm going to give something fairly early on. I do normally assign a rating to something right away, and then probably the next day I will say, you know what, this really should have been this, or it should have been that, and I will move it just slightly. And then again, you know, I did say that I reread, and probably within a year's time, you know, especially if I like something, I'll probably reread it. If it's been longer than that and I can't remember a title and I think maybe it's time to reread that, I'll reread it, and then I will again reevaluate my ratings. So the ratings are really, like, they don't really mean anything except for to me, and even if you look at the ratings, it could mean that I liked it and it had you know, terrible story, or it could mean that the story was great but I hated it. Like, they don't, the ratings themselves don't really mean anything to anyone except for me. So anyway, I thought I would show you some of the titles and what the ratings were and why I kind of made those judgments on them, and then you can kind of get a sense of what it is that I'm doing. So first of all, I'll show you 2 1-star reads. This one is Anomal by Nukuharu. I rate this 1 star. The only thing that it has going for it is that it's manga. This is actually, I believe, doujinshi, so it's a bunch of short stories. They're about sort of a paranormal events. There's nothing special about this. The stories really have been done before. The art in it is very average, below average in my opinion. The storytelling, it's sort of non-existent. I read it, I was kind of bored, I forgot it right away. I remember that there's something supernatural about it because of the cover. So the reason that I gave this only 1 star is because, in my opinion, this is one of the worst translations that I have ever read. And I have read one other volume of manga from this Gen Manga, who are publishing, I believe, doujinshi, and I will not be picking up more from them until I hear, like, rave reviews from other people that I respect. I just am not finding the actual publishing quality of this material to be worth money, and I think that's a real shame, because I think that there could have been an audience for it, and I could have been that audience. So this is a major failing in my opinion, and because of things like that, of course, I genuinely dislike this manga. So I can give it 1 star because it is manga, and that's about it. So the next one that I also rate 1 star is School Judgment, and This one is by Nobuaki, Enoki, and Takeshi Obata. I don't have this title because I did borrow it from the library, and I'm glad I don't have it because it's something that I really don't want. You know, it could have been kind of cute, and you know, I think by the end of the volume I was starting to be less annoyed with it, but it is incredibly obnoxious. It is really poorly written. From a writing standpoint, I didn't think it was very good. It was sort of in a very similar structure to a lot of series, and you can kind of see where it's going right from the beginning. The art in it is beautiful. Takeshi Obata is a great illustrator, and I think that he draws things nicely. And so I would have given it 2 stars, and I definitely debated over it, but when you get over to what my feelings are, I have very great moral objections to this title. But if you actually look at, there's a background character, he's an old man, he assists the prosecuting lawyer, who is this cutesy little girl, and he is he's drooling over her, he's touching her inappropriately, and it's just sort of laughed off as comedic titillation. This is a comic that is written for children, for youth, and this is not okay with me. And so seeing this in manga throws me way out of the story. I have to rate it quite a bit lower, and because of my feelings are so strong about this point, I actually do have to rate it a point less, despite the art. The art really is cute in some of the aspects. I did actually think that the girl herself was drawn really prettily, but I can't give it 2 stars because of this problem, and I can't buy it, and I can't recommend it. So there are, you know, things like that that will affect my other ratings. And going along with that same point, you know, this is the same problem that I have basically in that story, only this one was written for an older audience, and that is Girl on the Shore. But this one is a 2-star read for me. And, you know, despite my strong objections, despite how graphically explicit sexual scenes with young junior high age students are, this is still well written, it's still thought-provoking, the art is still really beautiful. And so as much as, like, I could have rated this 4 stars, but because of my abject disapproval of the content, I do have to give it 2 stars. So I do see that some people might actually like this title, but this is a 2-star read rather than a 4-star read just because of that particular issue. The next one that gets 2 stars is a new one. This is Honey So Sweet, Volume 1 by Amu Meguro. For me, like, it's not bad. It's like super duper average title. You know, the quality is like the standard Viz quality of manga, so it's pretty much like the average that you should expect from quality of manga. You know, that's pretty much like a 1/2 star for me. It is manga. It's gonna get 1.5 stars, and but I think that the story is completely without, like, there's nothing here for me. I have seen it before, and I've seen it in every other shoujo manga. It's pretty much, in my opinion, a collection of all of the major moments in shoujo manga that are used to develop a relationship and thrown into this manga. But instead of being used to develop a relationship or used to kind of create a story in any way, it's just used because those are like the highlights of most shoujo manga. So, you know, on the surface it might be kind of a fun title, but I have seen it so often that to me it's boring. Like, it's so predictable, there's no story, there's no chemistry. I'm not interested at all, and so because the story is not interesting to me, obviously I don't like it. So in general, this will get 1.5 stars. But then if I look at the art, again, the art is fairly average, but I am going to give it about a star for the art because of the use of screen tones. I do really notice the screen tones. I love screen tones, and I really dislike when modern mangaka are creating their manga entirely digitally, because I think it loses a lot of the charm that screen tones brought. So this manga has a beautiful use of screen tone, and so you know, as far as like story goes, not that great. Art goes, it's pretty average. Publishing, it's average. It is manga, so you know, all those things kind of totaled together gives me about like a 2.5 rating, and so that is why I rated it 2 stars. For 3-star reads, I would have From Far Away by Kyoko Hikawa. This is a fun title. It's basically a story about a girl who goes to another world and, you know, is sort of the chosen one, and something bad is going to happen and that she has to go on a quest with a handsome traveler. What can you not love about that in shoujo manga? It's like one of my favorite story types ever. Obviously, it's a story that I love. I have read it many times, and, you know, I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. Is the story great? No. There's some real holes in it. There's some confusing plot twists. There's some like repetitive storytelling, and there's some like rushing in particular areas that I don't like. So the story itself is sort of pretty average. The art, you know, it's not spectacular. I'm not particularly drawn to it, but it's not horrible. Like it's good, clean art. The character designs are pretty. So there's nothing like that sways me one way or the other. I think it's, you know, very admirable art. I do really like some of the character design, because not all of the characters in this are beautiful characters, but they're still part of the main group. You know, like not all the characters are intelligent or have all their hair or, you know, whatever, but they're still part of this main questing group, and I really appreciate that. In addition to that, I really like the way that Hikawa addressed the issue of language, because this girl is being transported to a new world with a new language. I like that she actually had to learn the language, and in so doing, the author actually drew the speech bubbles in a particular way so that you could identify when she was speaking Japanese and when she was attempting to speak this other language. So like that in particular I thought was really handled well, so I give it actually a fairly high rating for plot or story or just like character development. As far as quality goes, this one is one that has real translation issues, and particularly in the very first volume. This is actually volume 2, but in the first volume there are some very obvious translation issues, which cause the story to actually not make sense in some parts, and for jokes and story continuity to be an issue. But those few little things actually caused me to bring the rating down slightly. So for me, this is a pretty average manga. There's some really good things in it, and I really do like it, but on the whole, like, there are some real failings, in my opinion, to the story as well. Another shoujo manga that I rate 3 stars is QQ Sweeper by Kyousuke Motomi. This is the same author as Dengeki Daisy. Essentially, this is about characters who are janitors and go into kind of the souls of other characters and help to clean them out. That's the general premise. It's not a new premise. I have read it in many, many series. Just sort of this like window to your soul, or your soul being another world, or kind of the fantasy of going into someone's mind and cleaning it out for them, and then like them being completely healed. This is not a new concept, and so for me this is a story that I've read before. Not only that, artistically wise, these are the same characters that Kyousuke Motomi draws in all of her manga. Her design does not change much, and I would really like to see some change. I'd like to see some differences in her characters, and like you know there are some differences obviously, but for the most part her character design and her character personalities are consistent from manga to manga. It's just the same characters plopped into a new manga, and now they're living a different story. So for me, artistically, this isn't spectacular. Story-wise, this isn't spectacular. It's fine, it's good, but it's not doing anything new or special. And even compared to her other titles, it's not new or special. But, you know, I liked it. It was a fine title. I'm going to keep buying it. And it is manga, so, you know, like, I'm probably give it slightly lower ratings on art and story, but for the rest, I give it higher ratings, so it ends up with 3 stars. My next ones are going to be 4-star reads. This one I ended up reading yesterday. This is from the Black Museum. This is The Ghost and the Lady by Kazuhiro Fujita. This is a 4-star read for me. It was a great, great read. It was so good. I really, really enjoyed it. It is manga. I really liked it. That's 2 stars. The story in it is amazing, and you can really feel how much Fujita has researched and developed the story and really thought about the story. It's essentially a fantastical retelling of Florence Nightingale. It was amazing to read. I learned a ton. At the same time, it is fantastical, so there are parts in it where I wasn't entirely sure if these are, you know, based in facts or if they are part of fantasy, because Fujita was able to create this whole fantasy with a ghost character that kind of haunts her, and all of these sort of spirits that kind of manifest out of everybody's sort of like dark feelings that hang over everyone's heads. And so there's all this other like supernatural stuff that is going on at the same time to make the story more interesting, which it actually didn't need to do. It was a pretty interesting story. So it's compelling, it's well written, the fantasy and the history are seamless. It's a really well written story. I really, really liked it. But I hate the art in it a lot. And I know that other people really like it, but there are moments in the art where I just had to sit and look at it and say, like, where's the perspective? Like, I don't even understand what's going on. I don't know where hands are going, and, you know, it kind of looks, it's sloppy, and in some instances, I thought it worked, and I definitely was believable, like I could forgive it a lot, and it definitely moved the story along. There was a lot of times where I, you know, like despite how much I disliked the art, I thought that it actually did its job. So, like, I wouldn't say that it's a 0 star for that, but there were moments in it where I was just like aghast at some of the quality of the drawings, and yeah, so I was disappointed artistically, but I think that this manga is so worth reading, and it is beautifully written, and it is a great story, and even if you're not interested in the history of Florence Nightingale, I think it is compelling and interesting. Also, the quality of this manga is pretty high. I don't actually normally like a lot of Kodansha's hardcover books, but I think this is one of their higher quality hardcovers. It is a little bit more weighty. It still has like the standard weight pages in it, which is, you know, too bad for a hardcover, but it's fine. It's got a really nice cover, and the translation is really good, including an essay at the end, which I really, really appreciate. This is translated by Zach Davison. I have mentioned him before, great translator. This is almost a 5-star read, so apart from the art, which I disliked intensely, I thought it was a great, great read, and I'm really happy to have it in my collection, and I think you should read it right now. Do it. This title is also 4 stars for me. It is slightly a lesser 4-star than the previous one. This is Dissolving Classroom by Junji Ito. This is a vertical publication. The quality of vertical publications is very high, even for their paperbacks. You can see here you've got a gloss cover. I don't know if you can see, but the actual main 2 characters here, so they're raised on the cover or embossed, and they are matte, where the rest of the characters are all shiny, which is actually really disgusting because of what's happening to them. This is a really fun title. I really, really liked it. I love Junji Ito. Like, he's my fave. The art in it is wonderful. He's got the best horror art. I love it. I love his art so much. Even when he's drawing things dissolving, even when he's making my stomach turn, I love his art. And sometimes, you know, as much as I want to turn a page, I also want to stare and look at it because it's beautiful. He's just such a great illustrator. But this title gets 1 less star because of the story. You know, it is sort of an expected construct of horror manga. It is very repetitive, and it's sort of like, well, I know what's going to happen now. At the same time, like, the repetitiveness is used in order to heighten your disgust at the events and sort of to be concerned for whatever characters are going to come across these 2 main characters. But it does make it kind of slow, and then, you know, by the end you're just like, well, that happened again. So, like, it's good that it was short, but, you know, the repetitiveness of this does make me dock down a star. But everything else I think is great, and I really like this, and if you're into horror, I think you should check it out, or check out Junji Ito in general. I think this is a pretty accessible one. It is disgusting, and it made my stomach turn, but yeah, it was great, and I loved it. So this is a 4-star read for me. And then lastly, these are 5-star reads. These are both recent reads for me. This one is Itazura no Kiss, Volume 12 by Kaoru Tada. This is a 5-star read for me. It is a very nice publication. It's very weighty. The quality of the pages is quite high. The black inks is very high. The dimensions of the manga are very pleasing. So I really, really like just the quality in general. So it's going to get a star for that. It's going to get a star for being manga. It is going to get a star for storytelling. Like this particular volume, it just wraps up so well despite it not being the finale of the series. Like this is where it had to end because the author passed away. It does evoke great emotion in me. It does feel like a homage to the medical profession. And it's just, I don't know, just a beautiful romance. I do have issue with it. I do dislike a lot of the art in it. I know it's her style, but there are some characters in this that I really dislike how they're drawn. I have such strong feelings about this title, this volume in particular, that it's very hard for me to talk about. And it also is the reason that I give it 5 stars. I love this series, and I love this volume, and I wish there were more. There's no way that I could have rated it anything else. It had to be 5 stars. My last 5-star read also is a current or a recent read, and that is the Four Immigrants manga, Japanese Experience in San Francisco, 1904 to 1924, by Henry Yoshitaka Kiyama, translated with an introduction and notes by Frederick Schott. This is probably the least appealing exterior of a manga that I have read, but it is one of the, like, best things I've read. The translation we can start with by Frederick Schott. Anything by Frederick Schott is going to be a beautiful translation. There are some really great discussions about what this manga is and how he found it and how he translated it, which I think are absolutely wonderful. Is this manga? That is debatable. You know, if Frederick Schott says it's manga, I'm going to trust him, but I certainly think that it could be debatable. The story itself is it's humorous and captivating and an interesting social commentary, and it's really kind of highlights a moment in history that I don't think you see a lot in comics in particular, from a perspective that you don't see from. It's important, and it's also really enjoyable to read. The art style is definitely different than a lot of manga, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It definitely is indicative of the time and the place that it was being written, and I just, like, I ate it up. I thought it was wonderful. The publishing, as I have said before, I don't particularly like this format or this size, but the actual printing of the work is wonderful. The inclusion of the handwritten text in some of the bubbles is wonderful. The translation is wonderful. That is actually probably the biggest star in this 5-star rating. I just think it's really great translation. I was super impressed when I read it. And the last thing is, I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I was completely engrossed in it when I was reading it. I laughed out loud when I was reading it. I had feelings and, you know, like thoughts about you know, what was happening at this time. You know, like, it made me think about something important and not just like, you know, will these two characters, you know, end up together at the end. Anyway, obviously, I highly recommend it. I think you should read it. I think it's super relevant for what's going on in the world right now. And it's just really important, really good comic. It's good. It's not just important, it's good. And those things don't always coincide. So anyway, that is a 5-star read for me. So that's basically how I rate manga. I go through a bunch of questions in my head. I usually would do it quite quickly. I can answer these questions quickly because they're the questions I ask myself every time. These are the things that are important to me. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. If you rate your books or your reading in a similar way, I'd love to know, or how you rate your books, let me know. I think that would be a really interesting conversation. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Just a side note, just to announce our winner for the 5 manga giveaway that we had going for the manga readathon. It was a little bit extended over the readathon, so we didn't announce it yet. But we have shipped out the parcel, so if you're waiting to find out if you won, you already know if you won. This was for the giveaway where we asked people to create a video or to create a blog post recommending 5 manga for beginners, and we just drew the names randomly, and the winner was Alternative Briggs. So we have sent out the 5 manga to her, and hopefully she doesn't have them already, but you never know. Anyway, anyone who participated in that, we really appreciated seeing all of your videos and your blog posts, and for those of you who started actually making videos and blog posts for that, that was really cool, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more things like that again next year. Anyway, that's it for me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.